I always love hearing the stuff you guys got going on. And to quote a friend of mine, a dear friend from the 146th, who's not here, without an environment, there would be no Pennsylvania. That was so deep, I had to think about it for a while. But on to the questions. I have a couple about Act 13. Could we talk about that a little
Certainly.
bit? Act 13, as part of the bill, actually set aside $6 million annually to plug orphan or abandoned gas wells that had essentially been walked away from years ago. I'm wondering, are we still doing that? Are we using this $6 million to go patch up orphan wells?
We are using that money as indicated in Act 13. Yes, we have an inventory of about 12,000 or so wells, but we believe there are as many as 200,000 abandoned wells in the Commonwealth.
You never know you're on top of them until somebody's that just happened out in Indiana County. A family inherited land from their ancestors and had no idea there was an old well on it. And when they pressured the new well, it blew the old one right out the hillside. So we really appreciate your help with that. More from Act 13. In 2014, unconventional shale drillers saw their permit fees increase to $5,000 per horizontal deployment, $4,200 per vertical spine bore drills into the shale. This increase was projected to generate about $5 million annually for DEP. Now here's my question. With the downturn in gas drilling, is that still generating the money we had anticipated, and are we using that money for inspectors on well pads?
All right. The answer to your first question, Representative, is no, it's not generating the money that was anticipated. The amount of shale gas permits that were issued last year was reduced about 33%. With the downturn in pricing. So the income to the program has fallen. The oil and gas program is funded entirely by permit fees. It's not funded by the general fund. So we are looking at a situation where that revenue stream is going to crash head on into our staffing needs, and there may have to be an adjustment in that fee structure going forward. A
question then, if gas drilling has downturned, which I live in the gas patch, we see it, we lost Halliburton and a number of other big employers. If there are less well pads being developed, do we still have a need for the extra inspectors that you're saying we are below complement?
Yes. Very simply, we do not visit any conventional or unconventional gas well as often as we should. We have about 100 inspectors in the field, with about 227 folks in the entire oil and gas section, and 100 of those are on-the-ground inspectors. And we need to be on the ground more and visiting these individual wells and well pads more frequently than we do. So, frankly, Representative, the need is not reduced by the reduction in new wells.
So less new gas starts, more inspection. That's the message.
Well, less new gas starts, but the need for inspection on a per well basis. We need to visit each well 5 or 6 times over the course of its productive life. We're probably not even at half of that rate at this juncture. So what we are doing with this lull is allowing us to get around to some of these wells more frequently than we have in the past.
Well, that I read, and compliments to you for that. I read in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette not too long ago, we just did a sweep of the wells up in the northern tier, and it turned up something like 2,000 violations or something like that. And it struck me as funny, with us really not drilling anywhere in the forest now due to the governor's prohibition, and us churning up all of these violations, which I was told, to back up what you said earlier, were mostly clerical and not really operational errors. It just struck me as odd that we have to increase the complement at DEP when there's less wells to look at, seeing as how you've already gone through and cleaned out all the clerical errors on these well pads in the forest. I guess that's a perceptual issue, Mr. Secretary. Could I switch gears now to the EPA's Clean Power Plan?
Certainly.
I come from western Pennsylvania, and it's just breaking our hearts to watch 300 men at a time get shut down because our coal plants can't meet the Clean Power Plan. It interested us greatly that the Supreme Court ruled the Clean Power Plan was unconstitutional due to it not acknowledging the economic impact as was written into the original law. I also noted that smoke signals coming out of the administration says we're going to go ahead and comply with this even though the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional. Given our limited availability of manpower and of resources, how are we going to do that?
Okay.
That's the question.
Sure.
How are we going to do it?
Well, let me back up with a couple of observations. First, the Supreme Court did not declare the Clean Power Plan unconstitutional. It issued a stay on a lower court ruling. A stay is not a decision on the merits. And I want to put this into context and understand what's happening in the coal-fired power industry. Over the last 7 years, Pennsylvania's carbon dioxide emissions have fallen about 20%, from 134 million tons of carbon dioxide to 107 million tons today. That has been driven by three things. First, the Great Recession. Secondly, the mercury air toxics rule, a federal standard. And primarily, third and primarily, cheap shale gas. So if indeed there is a war on coal, it's being waged by natural gas, and natural gas is winning. So we've seen uncompetitive plants retired. But here's where the Clean Power Plan comes in. It requires Pennsylvania to reduce its emissions 33% by 2030. And the first compliance period starts in 2022. And in 2022, Pennsylvania's carbon dioxide emissions have to be 106 million tons, so only 1 million tons less than it is right now. So very frankly, business as usual gets us into compliance in the early years of the Clean Power Plan. The pinch will probably come between 2025 and 2030. But more fundamentally, whether we have a Clean Power Plan rule in effect or not, we know it's coming. We know what the future holds. There is a need to have lower carbon, in fact, ultimately zero carbon electricity generation if we're going to combat climate disruption. We know that cheap shale gas is going to be around for a long time. The early returns from the Utica Shale formation suggest that it is even more productive than Marcellus. So we will be blessed with an abundance of cheap shale gas for a long time to come, and that competitive pressure will continue to bring itself to bear on coal-fired power plants. And third, the cost curves of renewable energy are coming down at 10% plus per year. Renewable energy is getting cheaper all the time. And it is reaching grid parity in many states, and it's tantalizingly close to reaching that in Pennsylvania. So we know that the future is cheap renewables, cheap shale gas, and a need to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. So given that inevitable future, it just makes good business sense to continue to plan. And what we are doing is planning to comply. Because one of the possible outcomes of this Supreme Court stay is that if the compliance deadline of 2018 remains after all the court proceedings are over, and if we stop planning now, we'll have to restart and have less time to finish a plan than we would normally otherwise. So it just makes good sense to prudently continue to plan. It is extremely unlikely that we would be preparing or announcing a draft plan or submitting a plan to EPA while the stay is pending. So we're in a bit of a tolling period right now, but it just makes good business sense for us to continue to plan. We are one of 4 states that was selected by the National Governors Association to participate in their policy academy, so we have been able to procure at no cost to the Commonwealth some very sophisticated modeling services. So that hasn't cost the Commonwealth anything. And the very limited number of staff, probably 5 or 6 folks that spend part of their time on Clean Power Plan, it is a real bargain for the Commonwealth to continue to do this planning in a prudent way so that we can be prepared for whatever eventuality comes out of the courts.
That's very interesting. Could you share that cost per kilowatt hour a generation you're quoting? Because I recently saw one of those tables that says for us to generate a kilowatt hour from solar or from wind costs roughly $60 to $70 per kilowatt hour, yet if we go with nuclear, coal, or gas, it works out to roughly 10 or 12. The cost may be coming down, but that's still a great discrepancy. I'd love to look at your numbers.
Certainly.
One last thing. What is the governor's accord for a new energy future?
That is an agreement that I think 18 governors nationally representing both Republicans and Democrats have come together to agree to plan for increased deployment of alternative energy, reduced carbon energy sources, improved transportation planning, improved grid resiliency. So, and the effort is actually just beginning to get to take form. It was announced a couple of weeks ago. We haven't had the first in-person meeting yet, but the idea is to plan collaboratively with our neighboring states and take advantage of economies of scale and smart public policy to advance cleaner grid, cleaner transportation, cleaner power.
I noticed only New York and Virginia amongst our neighboring states have signed on to this. No Ohio, West Virginia, New Jersey, Maryland.
I think they're missing the boat, but no, they haven't signed on. But we have good partners in West Virginia and in New York.
Well, those are also coal-producing states. Chairman, that's for now about what I have. If we have a second round, I'd appreciate some time.